Hello everybody, Iron Man Mark 7 here, and today we are back in Planet Coaster, specifically in our park, Emerald Valley, for yet another episode. We've got this lovely view right here. In our last episode, we worked on the park entrance area. We've got plenty of guest amenities for our guests to enjoy as they enter the park. We've got food stalls, we've got picnic tables. Over here we've got a gift shop. Over here we've got a bunch of drinks and of course restrooms, information, an infirmary. Whatever our guests need to feel comfortable as they enter the park, that's what we went ahead and built in the last episode. So if you didn't see that, I highly recommend going back and watching that and checking it out. You'll also notice it's a little bit empty there at the moment, but that is a good thing because High Seas, the ride we built in episode 2, broke down. So we just got that fixed, and all of our guests are over there enjoying that ride. Okay, but as lovely as our entrance is, as Buccaneer Bay is, we want to go ahead and transition over to this side of the park where we'll be building another themed section of the park for our guests to enjoy. So, for lack of a better way to describe this area, we're going to be building basically a Spanish ruins adventure area. We'll have some Aztec Spanish inspired theming going on, and we'll hopefully be able to fill out this area pretty well. I don't know that we'll be able to get to everything in this episode. In fact, I'm pretty sure we won't be able to. We have a very large area planned out for this, and so it's going to take maybe an episode or two beyond this to fill that whole area out. But real quick, guys, before we get too much further into the video, if you like this video, please be sure to give it a like, possibly comment if you enjoy and feel like doing so. If you're at all new to my channel, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell to be notified about new Planet Coaster content as it comes out. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into it, guys. Alright guys, so the very first thing we start off with is a carousel area. I wanted to go ahead and put something kind of close to the entrance area so that we could have something for our guests to kind of hang out around the entrance and stay a little while, relax and enjoy before they move on into other parts of the park. And I might go ahead and add something over on the other side of the entrance plaza at a later date too, but I went ahead and made this carousel, and I was trying to get some sort of plaza there right in front of the carousel. It took me a little while to get it all in there and get it all figured out properly, but we eventually got there. So you see, I'm starting to put in some path pieces, and I never figure out how to get the path pieces to extend all the way over to the wall. So I just left it for the time being. We may go back to it in a future episode. But there we go, we finally got the path pieces put in. Now I was trying to figure out, okay, how in the world am I going to get a queue line up to the Ferris wheel? Well, I ended up deciding to go just like this. The exit line proved to be a bit more of a challenge. I tried bringing it down here on this side and couldn't get the pathing to work properly. There just wasn't enough room there. So after a lot of failed attempts, I ended up eventually just going about deleting the whole thing. And you'll see I decide to move it around the backside here. So we go ahead, slope up the hill just a bit, and bring it into the backside of the carousel. So now we've got all the pathing and such laid out. I went ahead and experimented with colors a bit. Got all the colors looking just right. Red, yellows, whites. The kind of thing you would expect to see on a Venetian carousel. Now we'll go ahead and move on to the theming around the carousel. Of course, we had to have a horse This is something I didn't even know was in the pack until I watched a episode of Gleevum Manor by Roscoe Gaming. He's a very new YouTuber, but he has some great Planet Coaster videos. I've very much been watching and enjoying those. And I suggest, guys, that if you want to go give him a look, please do so. He would definitely appreciate it. This is a little free shout out from him. We might do a new episode together in a later episode. We'll see. I might have to arrange something. So here we've got Gallopers. That's what I've decided to go ahead and name this carousel. It's kind of a throwback to Roller Coaster Tycoon. I believe that's the default name they had for the carousel in that game. And so I kind of wanted to pay homage to that because that's how I started playing these sort of games, is with the original Roller Coaster Tycoon on my family PC in the living room. Okay, so now we're going to start putting around some trees and bushes and rocks and such around the carousel. As you guys may have noticed, this is a tropical themed park, so we wanted to make sure that all of the foliage, all the rocks and such match that aesthetic. So you don't have a huge amount of options to choose from, especially with rocks. There are only 6 or 7 different rocks that you have available to you with this specific theme type, this specific nature type. So you have to play around with it a lot and, shift them, turn them, rotate them in different ways in order to make it all come together. This horse here, I got this on the workshop, and I wanted to have this here as to just kind of reinforce the idea that you're on a carousel. So you're going to be doing some horseback riding on this carousel. So I went ahead and put in this horse, and it is animatable. So I went ahead and set up some triggers for it, so every hour or so it would just kind of, rear up and come to life. Alright, so we're going to finish out the rocks here, put in some more bushes and such. And this queue line was looking a little bare, so I started to decide to try and figure out how you could liven it up a little bit. And I found these balloons on the workshop. These are amazing. I love them. They're recolorable, and they just look so good. So I went ahead and put groups of 3 around, grouped them all up, and then moved them into place along the queue line to give the guests something else to look at as they go through the queue line and prepare to get on the carousel. Now we needed something else, some sort of main scenery prop to draw the guests' attention. So we went ahead and put in this bandstand with some pennant flags strung to either side of it. And we need something in the bandstand. Well, I was thinking there was a band prop that we could use, but I couldn't seem to find it, so I went ahead. I experimented with a barbershop, but that wouldn't even fit. So I went ahead and put in a little pipe organ on the bandstand. Looks good and really fits with the classical theme park aesthetic that we were kind of going for with this carousel. Okay, a few more rocks around the back, and we're probably going to end up moving on to the next section of the park. Now, this carousel is all good and such, but the real goal of today's episode is to make, well, Emerald Valley. This park is named Emerald Valley after all, and it has no valleys. So I wanted to start working on a valley today. And so where better to do it than right next to the entrance here. So we do a little bit of terraforming. The terraforming tool in Planet Coaster is miles above anything we ever had in any of the Roller Coaster Tycoon games. I love it. Sometimes it can be a bit finicky. You see I accidentally flood it with water once or twice there, but in general this tool just works so well. So we went ahead and extended the water over to the side of the valley there, and then put in a body of water down at the base. Now I have in mind that we need to bring the monorail over here, because this is essentially a whole different section of our park. So we need a way for guests to get over there that doesn't necessarily involve them walking that whole way. You know, some guests aren't quite as accessible. Wheelchairs and such. We got to take these kinds of considerations into mind. So I went ahead and built a monorail over here, and after a little fiddling to get it in place properly, we finally got it, and I just went ahead and built the next section of track so that we can later on extend that out. Now I went ahead and terraformed a little bit around the monorail track, and we are going to start working on the pathing system going down into the valley. The pathing system, I gotta say, the pathing system is the one thing I would change in Planet Coaster. I know it's pretty good. It's, again, miles above everything we ever had in Roller Coaster Tycoon, but it does have its quirks and its problems, and it's can be a real pain. So here you see I tried to make a path down, and it turns out it was too steep. And even when I managed to bring it up a little bit, it still ended up being too steep. So what I finally figured out that worked was to kind of just wind its way down. And I looked at that, and that looked kind of stupid, so I decided, okay, we're going to expand this area out over here a little bit, and we'll wind it down a little bit more gradually. So after a lot of terraforming and such, we finally managed to make it work. And so there's the finished path you see there. We're going to go ahead and bring up the rest of the terrain around it again. And we're going to flatten the area out down here a little bit so that we can build to our heart's content. And then we'll later, once we have other stuff back in place, we'll kind of deform the terrain again. So I made a little bridge over the river here. And now we're going to work on the entrance area. So right there where the path transitions from that red texture to the gray stone texture, that's where I want to make the entrance. So after a little more terraforming, kind of getting things the way we want it, I come back up here and I start looking at the arch pieces. We have this wonderful arch piece here. It kind of has an Aztec vibe to it. And that's what I want to reinforce as you go down in here. This valley is a very old and ancient valley, and man once was down here. You know, they built their structures and such, and I don't know what the reason would be, whether it was floods. Of course, we've got the river down there that will eventually be fed by a waterfall once we put that in. We've got all kinds of scenarios for reasons why they could have abandoned this place. But regardless, it is abandoned. So we want to get that ancient feeling going with this whole build. So I went ahead and put in the arch. I put in these little ancient looking fence pieces. And then I start playing around with the masonry. And we're going to see a lot of masonry blocks in this video. So we start building up some walls framing the archway with lots of broken, decrepit pieces mixed in for effect. And just some accents as well, just to enhance the overall picture that we're going for. You know, it's important to try and kind of theme this as realistically as possible, because that's what we are going for, is a very realistic approach. We want to make it look like it's an ancient area that is slowly being reclaimed and repurposed. So there on the fence we've got some lights. I went ahead and hid that one in a bunch of rocks so that we could disguise a little better, because that doesn't look very ancient, those spotlights. That one I went ahead and hid in the bushes. And now we're going to go ahead and make our way down the path. We want to make sure that this is properly lit for our guests who are there at night. So I went ahead and used these adventure lampposts and brought those all the way down into the valley, moving them across so that I could light up both sides of the path, not just one. And so as I do that, I wanted to ask you guys a question. You know, I have a very definite plan as to how this portion of the park will go, and I do have some ideas as to how we can expand out Buccaneer Bay too. But I'm kind of at a position where I'm not entirely sure how to advance after that. So I'd like to have 4 distinct scenery theme ideas for the rest of the park. You know, we've got pirates, we've got an ancient valley area, and I'm thinking maybe we could do a jungle research lab at some point. But after that, I don't know what kind of ideas I should do for the 4th area of the park. So if you guys have any ideas as to how I could do that, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. I would really love to hear your ideas and your feedback. Okay, with that being said though, let's go ahead and focus back on the video a little bit. I went ahead and built this wall here. Later on, I intend to have some sort of water ride going down the river. So I wanted to make sure that people going down the river on the boat ride would be able to see that this was the ancient Emerald Valley area of the park, but wouldn't necessarily be able to see inside, so it keeps that mystery alive until they decide to go into the park. You know, we want to very much keep areas of the park separate as their own separate entities so that they can be experienced without breaking your immersion. So here we're going ahead, we're adding in the waterfall. It looks pretty good so far. I'm just trying to get this river as close as I can to the actual valley without, you know, breaking it and having that water spill into the valley, as you saw we had a problem with earlier in the time lapse. Now, I wish there was a better way to do this, and there might be for all I know, but I can't figure out a better way. So I went ahead and put in some basically large sprinklers to form the basis of the waterfall, and to kind of hide those away and make this a more realistic waterfall, I added in some rocks and such to kind of frame it and keep the water in its bounds. So we go ahead and put in a bunch of rocks along here to just kind of hide the whole thing away. And then we bring up the train just a bit to hide those last few sprinklers. Now, I had an idea for over here by the carousel area, and I wanted to, you know, come over here and finish that out. So I went ahead and put in these concrete walls here to just kind of frame the plaza area, and brought these fences all the way over. I realized I didn't do that before. Okay, so we go ahead and move on to the monorail station. I put this in earlier, and I wanted to start kind of building up a ride, building around it. Now, you're going to look at this and you're going to say, well, wait a minute, this doesn't fit at all with the theming, and you're right, it doesn't. But the reasoning I have for this is that this monorail is a very new fangled thing. It doesn't fit at all with the theming of this area. It's not old, it's not ancient. So how in the world do you incorporate that when you want to have a monorail station that goes throughout your park? Well, my reasoning is that, we're starting to slowly reclaim this area back from nature, back from time. So the first step that the park builders took was to build a monorail so that you could get to this area. And so they went ahead and built this modern building, and this is basically the first advances of civilization trying to come back to this area. I started off with brick and didn't really like it, so I decided to go back to what we'd done with the previous station and make it a very modern concrete and vinyl wall building. So I went ahead and put in a bunch of concrete walls along the bottom there, and then I pulled the terrain back out so that it was sitting firmly on terrain. I want it to just kind of be nestled in its own little corner right above the water there. So we fill in all the frame pieces for the building's foundations, and we start pulling in all the wood pieces. And I wanted to get that as close to the platform as possible so it's a seamless transition. Okay, and then I went for a modern style here, and believe it or not, thanks to, again, Roscoe Gaming, I was able to finally find some clear window pieces in the build menu. I didn't know they existed, no idea whatsoever. Also, they were a little too clear, so I went ahead and shaded them just a bit. But we have windows in a building finally, so I might go back and add those to our entrance building at some point too, because I do want to have windows in there. I think that would be a really cool addition. Okay, so the building was in the way a little bit, so I had to go ahead and move it around again. Didn't quite get it centered when I started building the first time. So after a lot of fiddling, managed to finally get it in place, and we put in all the flooring on the opposite side. Start working out where to put the entrance and such. I wanted to have a little separating barrier between the ride operator and the rest of the crowds, so I went ahead and put in that short 1-meter wall there. And just like we did with the other station, I went ahead and put in some support beams. Went ahead and made them all black and mirrored them on the other side. And then we're going to start building out our exit. So it took me a bit of work to try and get that in place, and then, as you can see, it goes pitch dark. Yeah, it was a bit of a challenge to try and get that path coming out in the right spot. Had to put down some lamps because I couldn't see where in the world I was going. And then you see I bring it out a little too low, have to take it back a little bit, and then I brought it out at the proper level. So I went ahead and filled in my hole, removed all the lamps because those aren't the ones we're going to be using. And now we go ahead and put in the entrance path. I figured this is a real quick, simple monorail. It doesn't need a long path. We're good with that. Okay, we're going to fill in the rest of the foundation here, build up the walls. And pretty much call it good with this building. We'll probably come back to it and do a little more editing as time goes by. But for now, I went ahead and just put some walls above the support beams. Went ahead and mirrored that over on the other side. And went ahead and put a roof on it. Like I said, we'll probably come back. We definitely need to add some lights. I realized afterwards that I didn't do any lights in there. And we definitely need lights. But for now, I decided that was good. We were going to move on to something else. So as I go ahead and put in the last bits of wall here, we'll go ahead and move to a different part of the park. Alright, so we went ahead and moved on to the waterfall area here, and after a little bit of time pondering what I should do with this area, I finally decided that we were going to go ahead and make a guest relaxation meeting area, whatever you want to call it. So I played around with some paths again, trying to get it to work just like I wanted, and there we finally got it. So I want to build a building right here, so I went ahead and removed the bridge and moved it over just a bit so I had room for that building. Now with that being done, I was trying to decide what kind of material I should use, and finally decided on concrete, because why not? Okay, concrete foundations are going in. I wanted to make sure that they lined up nicely with it. So I went ahead and moved the concrete foundations down a bit, and then aligned the path pieces with that grid so it would all match up nicely. And I extend the concrete foundation out a little bit more because that's where the building will be, on that right-hand side there. And I decided to put in some fence pieces. These stone pieces match pretty well with the concrete. So I went ahead and used those. Aligned it, and then I pulled it over on the other side and copied it, and with some adjusting we finally got it all in place. Now we're going to move on to the building. Again, I wanted to emphasize that this was a older building, although perhaps not quite as old as you would think. So I went ahead and went with the theming of the area, but it's fairly obvious this isn't an old building. It's actually a fairly recent addition. They didn't have many Mexilentes back in the days that we're describing. So, after adding a Mexilente and a Street Fox coffee, and a bathroom there, I went ahead and played around with the path pieces. It took me ages to get them to line up properly, and I finally figured out it was because of the whole big path piece out there. So it took me a while to figure that out, delete it, and get it all hooked up properly. And then I re-hooked it up back to the main path. And after putting in a bunch of columns and such around the building, got it looking just like I wanted. I was trying to top off the top of the building, and I couldn't find a good piece in masonry to do that. See, the weird thing about masonry pieces is they are actually all freeform. So they don't align to a grid very well. You actually have to build the building out piece by piece and get it all aligned just so. So it took me a while to get it all working properly, but we finally did. It all turned out okay. And there I put the back on. I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and then I hit the wrong button and ended up deleting it, so I went ahead and did it again. And lo and behold, I hit the wrong button again. And you get to see all that in a time lapse. I'm so glad you guys got to see that. Alright, this stone fence here, though, didn't match up with the color scheme, so I went ahead and recolored it. Put in a Mexilente sign, a Street Fox coffee sign, so people know exactly where they're going when they come here. And now we're going to work on a little bit of scenery and theming around here too, so I went ahead and put down this rowboat and got this archaeologist animatronic who will sit in the rowboat and just kind of relax. We've got a palm tree here, and I thought, you know what, a palm tree would be great right next to this waterfall, hanging out. So I went ahead and got the one that hangs out just right. Put in some animatronic fish and swans and everything. And then I found this guy. This guy is actually from the workshop. Little chimpanzee. I went ahead and put him in the tree so that he would stare at all the people who are buying their food and having their lunches. Put in a few more trees along here to just kind of, again, put us in that jungle atmosphere. Put in some bushes. Put in some red bushes for a little extra color there. And some rocks at the base of the waterfall. And a few more rocks here. We're going to go ahead and make this into a kind of a sign area, just like we did with Buccaneer Bay. But we're, of course, going to place some flowers and some bushes there. And there's a box light that we're going to place down. And then we'll go ahead and put this editable sign on the rock face, and we're going to name it. Took me a minute to figure out what in the world I was going to name this place. I want to stick with a Spanish naming scheme, so you see on the archway at the entrance to this area, we named it Villa Esmeralda. Well, here we're just going to go with La Esmeralda, or the Emerald. Put in some picnic benches so guests could sit down and enjoy their food, and some trash cans, of course, so they can dispose of their waste once they're gone. Went ahead and put in a speaker here on the tree, and I set it to the Planet Adventure song. So it's just a Planet Coaster theme, but with an adventure twist on it. And I put in some jungle noise speakers. Alright, we're going to go ahead and paint some landscape here. And then I want to put in a few more special effects. So I had this leaf blowing effect that I put in over the path since we had a bunch of trees there. I figured that was kind of nice. Went ahead and reworked this path just a bit to make sure that it actually fit and wasn't hovering in the air. I don't like it when paths tunnel and cut out the bottom part underneath it. I would much rather it sit on the ground. I went ahead and roughed up the terrain just a bit more here. And then we go ahead and put in some lights. I went ahead and cut out all that so you guys wouldn't have to bother with that. And then I was trying to figure out what we would do as far as rides go down here. I wanted to get a start on one, but I couldn't figure out what. And then I realized, guys, I'm releasing this right after the Ghostbusters update, which added in these awesome new rides. They're called... what are they called? They're called gun range rides, I guess. If you've ever been to a theme park, you get in a car and it takes you along a predetermined route, and you have these little laser pistols that you can use. That's what I'm trying to do right here, and that's what this new ride is. So this new ride gives our guests laser pistols, and they can shoot at the targets as they go through the ride. So there we go. So I cut out a cavern underneath the hillside here. I wanted this to be a dark ride, and I started to put that in. So I go ahead and place it down, and I've never used this before, so I wanted to make sure that I got a good grasp of the ride mechanics and how it worked. And so after getting that done, I started to play around with what my layout was going to look like, and I had an idea of how I wanted to do it. So with dark rides generally, you want to make sure that you're going around a bend so you can't see what happens after that when you leave the station. So I wanted to have this bend in here, and I hit test function just cuz. Then I built this archway here. We're going to go ahead and put in one of these triggerable coaster doors. I went ahead and put in a trigger so that we could see how it worked, see if we got the timing right, and we did pretty good. So then comes building the station around it. So we went ahead and used masonry pieces and some limestone castle wall pieces. It was kind of a weird combination, but it worked. I went ahead and recolored all the limestone castle wall pieces so that they matched with the masonry in terms of color. And and then just expanded it to both sides of the station. Did all the recoloring and such. And now I want to start blocking off that field of view as you exit the station. So I started putting in this wall here. I did a little retexturing on the ground. Finally decided on this sandy, rocky texture. It kind of fit with the temple theme we were going for. And after playing around with the wall pieces a little bit and trying to figure out how to properly accent and such, I decided on putting some pillars to the sides of the archway and then supporting that with a great big, or having those support a great big piece of stone above it. So it's a very heavy piece. You want to make sure that those pillars really look like they're holding it up. And I think it works pretty well. Okay. Went ahead and put some torches here so that you could see it without putting in all these high-tech white lights. So it looks much more natural now that I've gotten rid of all those. I went ahead and played with the track a little bit because I wanted a little more room there in that curve for some parts, and I couldn't get it to connect back together. I was having some troubles with it, but I finally managed to get it. And so there you see the final track layout. Went ahead and brought the ceiling down so that the wall pieces kind of clipped into the ceiling. And then we're going to go ahead and put the rest of the wall pieces along there to just kind of further block off your line of sight. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing on this side, bring out a wall over here to again block off your line of sight as you come out of the station and leave what's on the other side a little bit of a mystery. So I brought out some more heavy stone blocks to sit on top of that wall there. And I didn't like how the lighting from the torch went ahead and clipped through that wall that juts out. So I played around with the torch light a little bit, and I never could figure out how to keep it from clipping through that wall there. So what I ended up doing after, trying to delete the torch, and that wasn't quite what I wanted, I finally just decided, you know what, if you can't beat it, join it. So I went ahead and put some torches in on this side, just so it's not noticeable. And it works, it really does. I went ahead and put in this sign, rotated it just a hair, so that it looks like it's not quite mounted in there properly, it's fallen down over the ages. Put in a mummy's ahead on the sign, and then I stuck a little hanging sign below it and put in "Be ready." Alright guys, that is going to be the end of this episode, but real quick before we end out this episode, I wanted to go over just a quick overview of everything that we accomplished today. You of course saw all of it in the time lapse, but it might be a little bit better for you to see it as it is in a normal speed. So let's go ahead, we're going to take a real quick look over here at the carousel that we started off the time lapse with. This is Gallopers. You may have seen me placing down this sign in the time lapse. These amazing horses that you can place down to either side, those look amazing. And apparently our guests actually quite like this ride because they are filling up this line. Got it about half full, I'd say. So they're really enjoying that. Alright. And I really think this area turned out great. I'm really happy with it. Over here, of course, we have the entrance to the Emerald Valley. That looks amazing. We've got our little archaeologist friend over here digging a hole. And he's just having a great time. And over here we've got this amazing wreck, I guess you could say, in the waterfall. This actually wasn't in the time lapse. I wasn't recording when I built this. but I think it just looks amazing. We've got these tropical roots that are jutting out of the mountain, kind of crisscrossing the waterfall, and this plane just, kind of had an unfortunate accident at the exact wrong place, and there it is. The tail is broken off and hanging there, kind of supported by the landing gear. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, kind of supported by the landing gear being sitting there on those roots. So it looks great. We've got the restaurant, of course, where people can sit here and look at that plane as it hangs there. We've got this little chimpanzee that's just sitting there watching all of our guests have their meals, or will be once they actually start filtering down here. We got to have some rides first to attract them down here, but we've got the station, and we've got this ride that you saw me working on at the end of today's time lapse. And hopefully we will be able to come back to this episode to this area in the next episode. We'll be able to cover it a little bit more. I have a lot of plans for this area, a lot of stuff that we weren't able to finish in today's episode. But there you go, guys. Emerald Valley is coming along. We will have more in the next episode to work on and to finish up. But for now, guys, that is all the time we have for this episode. So if you liked this episode, please be sure to let me know by hitting that like button. Subscribe if you're new to my channel and like what I do. And I will see all of you folks in the next episode.